So my name is Jason Alejandro. I'm an assistant professor of graphic design at the College of New Jersey, and I'm also an independent designer and art director working with clients across publishing, higher education, cultural sector, and businesses as well. My family is from Puerto Rico. I was born here in New Jersey, raised here in New Jersey, but through my childhood, we would frequently go to Puerto Rico where my grandmother and my aunts had a house there. While I do identify as Latino, I think I also identify as Puerto Rican. I identify as Caribbean, since I think the term Latino can sometimes be fraught with colonial undertones and means a lot of different things to different people, depending on who you're talking to. I spent the majority of my childhood, I would say, trying to be as white as my white friends, really, and really rejected the Puerto Rican aspect of my identity or my heritage, which also is complicated because to be Puerto Rican can mean a lot of different things to Puerto Ricans. My own ancestry is predominantly Spanish from Spain, as well as African. Slaves were brought to Puerto Rico in the 16th century, and then also indigenous, which is Taino. So realizing that, my own identity is kind of tied to these different places geographically and also politically and historically is something that I've been trying to kind of figure out, learn more about, research, make work about. So I think a lot of my work is kind of questioning the environment in which I was brought up in, the values which were imparted upon me, conservative Christian values, questioning those things, rejecting those things, pushing up against those things, realizing that there is a much greater amount of inequity and injustice in the world. Those are some of the things that I think inspire some of my work. I'm also really interested in language and typography. The language that we use is really important and the words that we use are very important. And so because I'm poor at speaking Spanish, I tend to rely on graphic design as a way for me to communicate with another language. And so it becomes a kind of like a translatory device to explore language and meaning with language and things like that. I think of graphic design in terms of how it can help individuals, how it can help me make sense of the world around me and kind of create meaning from things that I learn about or I discover. So I think graphic design kind of inspires me by leading me to other things. Yeah, I have a series of 3 posters that are up right now in the show titled Bomba. And Bomba is a traditional Puerto Rican music, but also a form of dance. It's kind of both of those things intertwined. One of the posters has the word bomba on it, which has 2 meanings. It's both what I just said, and then it's also the word bomb in Spanish. And throughout much of the 20th century, Puerto Rico was the site of missile testing. The Puerto Rican island of Vieques, the U.S. Navy used it as a missile range, basically, and it wreaked havoc on Puerto Rico's ecosystem and ecology and wildlife there. So the other posters include other words that have kind of like layered meaning or different meanings, but that are also related to music. So in some ways, the work is a celebration of Puerto Rico's Black culture because so much of its music is tied to its African roots and the slaves that came to the island and left their mark through music and dance. But then on another level, the work is also about the fact that Puerto Rico is really still a U.S. colony and has always been a colony, so exposing that. Before I was teaching at TCNJ, I was working at an agency here in New Jersey, at a design agency. And I have to admit that for the few years I was there, I was fairly isolated from the kinds of critical conversations about race, for example, or police brutality or inequity in general. I mean, these were things that at my job, we weren't really talking about while we were doing work for commercial clients. And so immediately when I started in fall of 2019, it was a different environment, a different atmosphere where, I was really open to having these conversations with students and realized that my presence there could be helpful for brown students and students of different backgrounds. I grew up here in New Jersey. I was born in Elizabeth, an urban area, a low-income area, but then I also lived in suburbs of New Jersey where friends of mine were very affluent. And I think that there's a tremendous financial disparity just within our own state. Having a sense of where our students come from and what their backgrounds are is really important to making them feel heard and understood in the classroom. So my students have absolutely influenced me in major ways, whether it's various causes or issues that they want to research in their work, whether it's something they just want to talk about, during advising, or it's a project that they see that they come across somewhere that they have opinions about. So yeah, absolutely. A memorable one, gosh, I don't know if this is meaningful in any way, but I think it certainly stands out in my memory. I had a project at the last agency that I worked at for a large healthcare client, and it was branding for an event. I had been working on one idea. My colleague was working on another idea for a number of weeks. And then it was the day of presenting. And once we kind of put all of the work side by side, we realized that it was like too similar. And so literally 2 hours before the presentation, I had to completely redo this identity I had been working on. I did it, and I came out, and we were like, this is minutes before we're supposed to have this call to present it. And we're like, wow, this actually like came out really good. Like, it's exciting. It's great. Everybody was on board with it. And then we found out just in that moment, right before the call was supposed to happen, that the actual event had been completely canceled. Design can be a bumpy road like that. There are things outside of our control. There are factors that we don't have any say in that are going to affect the work that we make. I think it's just really important to don't be too precious with your work. And as a book designer, rejection really comes with the territory. So for any given project, I might design anywhere between 5 to 10 book covers. And, it's only one that gets picked in the end, right? Sometimes there's even more revisions beyond that. Sometimes they ask, and it's a process of back and forth. And so I think you have to also really be good with getting feedback and implementing feedback and not holding on too dearly to your work.